Nomshado, welcome to BRICS Africa Channel.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, particularly during election day. It's a lot of
Great
emotions.
stuff, great stuff. Tell us about your organization and what work and your role in these elections.
So my name is Nomshado Nkosinkulu. I'm from Media Monitoring Africa. I'm head of communications there. Our organization has been operating since 1993. Particularly, our first mandate was to monitor media coverage, particularly because we're moving into a democratic era and wanted to see how will media fare with this newfound media freedom. We've been monitoring each and every election we've held since then. And obviously, with the morphing and changing of the information ecosystem, with the introduction of the digital era, a lot of issues also started transpiring there. So we've had a lot of initiatives around mitigating online harms, also looking at media policy around those and issues around content regulation.
Cool. And what have you found this time around since you've been doing this for so long?
So we found quite a lot of things. I think for the past 4 years, we've been situated in a different position because of our partnership with the IEC, the Electoral Commission, around being the official platform when it comes to the reporting of mis and disinformation. So looking at trends and looking at the influx of those narratives, particularly during the eve until till date, has been quite interesting because there's been a lot on attacks against the integrity of the electoral process, particularly the IEC. There's also been attacks on media themselves not being ethical and also not being transparent, looking at how various parties in their sense were not covered or were not given voice. We've also started seeing fake narratives around results being released already, particularly also from the international voters as well. And the danger around that is obviously we are living in a society, never mind even a local country, but a continent where we're still dealing with a digital divide, where media and digital literacy is still an issue. So not everyone understands that we need to take things in a different eye and a different lens and not at face value. So those are some of the narratives that we've also been seeing online.
And what are the major platforms doing about the misinformation that is there?
So in 2021, we're able to bring the tech platforms to one table because we started realizing, particularly during elections, the speedily manner in which we deal with these narratives is quite key. So in 2021, we're able to sign a framework of cooperation with the different platforms. And as well as in 2024, we're also able to do that. Unfortunately, X was not part of the platforms, yes, signing this time. They did sign in 2021, but obviously that was before the
The change
change,
of
yes, of ownership and so forth. And it's also been alarming, but we're still obviously putting in our efforts to ensure that we're bringing them back into the table. But with the lack of, African policy team, it's been quite difficult. But the social media companies, tech platforms, your Meta, your TikTok, your Google, have really been in the forefront in ensuring that any narratives that need a takedown notice or any narratives that need to be dealt with, they're on hand. We've got a team that is there and ready to work with us on it.
And why X? What issues did they bring on the table that they didn't want to sign?
There was no one to communicate with. Our previous team that we were engaging with is no longer, so that team was dismantled. And I think obviously the way that the teams are kind of situated, if there's no African policy team, trying to get to the whole international team is also a whole different conversation at hand. So
Okay.
I think that has been one of the things that has been grappling in ensuring that we're bringing them back in.
But when you're engaging with these, surely you do tell about the legislation, especially the 48-hour rule, and yet the same platforms are letting gates open. And I've seen parties, official parties, really, really pushing their messages within the last 48 hours.
So,
Was there
that's
conversation about
interesting
it?
because I think it actually brings about the gray area that is not really spoken of. Because particularly when we're looking at, political ads, which is what we've also been monitoring and looking at, is that, if I set a certain period that my ad should run, regardless of, the 48 period of that gray area is still there.
Sure.
And I think it's a conversation clearly that we need to have in the future because I think every report that we've had for the past few years, particularly from the observers, is that lack of accountability for those 48 hours.
And the parties, have they really, really taken up and your numbers increasing with the real 411?
I mean, there's been a huge influx since I think yesterday midday, all the way running over till early hours, and some of them are also coming from political parties themselves. And I think it really brings to the fore, the role of political parties when it ensures that they're informing in terms of credible information, but also, in terms of mobilization and how they communicate with their voters regarding this information is key.
Sure. And what kind of consequences would one think of, or what recourse can IEC take when the real political parties that are registered for these elections are in the forefront of distributing such
Yeah,
messages?
I mean, the political parties themselves and leaders are bound. I mean, the minute they are registered and they do sign, they're bound by the code of conduct, so they can go all the way to the electoral act. I mean, court rather. And obviously, that process is quite a lengthy one, particularly now when we're right bam in the middle of elections. And it clearly, it shows that that borderline, that little line that is always not spoken about, that keeps being pushed all the time, is one that we need to start flagging. But in terms of consequences, they're definitely there, and they know that themselves
Sure.
as well. And hence, they have a way of monopolizing with the space and playing with the words that they use, and kind of like trying to meddle with that gray area
Sure.
as well.
You mentioned that there's already results out for the expat votes and those who voted
Yeah.
elsewhere than in South Africa. Has the IEC really pushed its international message that votes can only be counted at the same time?
Yeah. So I mean, we're working hand in hand with them as the narratives are coming in, and particularly that one. It's one I think they've been also pushing on their side to say that there are no results that have been published currently right now. However, with the sophistication in way they're presented, you wouldn't even blink twice when you see them,
Sure.
because of, it's graphics, it's percentages, it's statistics, it's a screen that looks like,
Wow.
these are the actual results that are out. And because particularly looking at the international audience, it's international, not local. Some people might give it a different mindset to say that, okay, maybe because they voted first, perhaps the results are also out. And I think that's where we start, regaining and going back around voter education and the importance of helping, the electorate understand the process of the whole, election voting period.
So you're saying that these messages are not necessarily coming from domestic creators. Clearly, it's, as you're saying, that the engagement with it, the sophistication, the time spent, and the resources spent to create those graphs.
Yeah.
It are you suggesting that international spaces are highly interested of cascading such messages?
I mean, it's not necessarily an international agenda, but I think it's a mixture of both, particularly more local than anything. And also the danger with, because in each platform we're dealing with different formats of the same narrative,
Sure.
it's very difficult to find the originator, the individual that actually started, especially with the usage of technology, bots, botnets, and the amplification that comes with that. So knowing very well that the actors might very well be here, might very well be outside South Africa, is what actually even makes it more dangerous.
Sure. So when people find this on these platforms, where do they report this?
So we urge everyone to please go to realfund1.org to report any mis and disinformation they come across. And most importantly, don't like and share and comment on any narrative that you're not certain of. If you really don't want to go to the extent of reporting, rather, ignore and really don't engage, because that's how it gets, amplified, and the impact starts going through to the different audiences. So,
Nomshado, thank you very much.
thank you for having
Great
me.
talking to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.